Yeah.
Boom, put it on a projector and it's like, there's the time. Absolutely.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is going to be awesome. Hey everyone, welcome to the Liberal Conservative Show. My name is Kevin. I'm your host for the Liberal Conservative. Today with me I have a very special guest, Mayor Taylor Hardin.
Thank you very much for having me, Kevin. I've been excited about this for a long time.
And Taylor, just out of curiosity, for over the course of the many weeks and times that we get together for me to host you, to have the show, how would you prefer to be referred to?
Oh,
Mr. Hardin?
No, you can call me anything you want. So I get this at the store a lot. Somebody will say Tyler or Tanner, and I'm like, Tyler, Tanner, Travis, Taylor. It doesn't matter to me. So yeah, anything you want to do. Yeah, or Mayor Hardin or Taylor. Honestly, between you and I'm always perfectly fine if you just call me Taylor.
Taylor? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can call me Kev.
Perfect.
Don't call me the Liberal Conservative.
Yeah. I was gonna say I love how those two match up. Yep.
Right, and that I
Such a
love
fun
the
play on
whole
words.
paradox of that.
Yep.
And then I was just like, hey, you know what? It might be just something fun. People ask like, well, how does that make sense? Well, there's a little tiny town in Southwest Kansas. It's called Liberal. So.
The second I saw when you created this, I was really excited right off the bat because you did this at a time where it was not popular to be proliferating that you're a conservative. And so I thought, that's amazing. And then when I looked at the name, and I'm like, oh yeah, because our geographic location, but I thought, people that see this that are familiar with our area right off the bat are going to be like, what?
This guy needs a little history lesson. He's kind of confused.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm glad that other people in the area get the play on the words. So.
Yes, sir.
So tell me, why did you want to get involved in local politics?
Oh, okay. So back whenever I opened TFA, I had always known about, this Good Old Boys Club that was in Liberal, of these same people that ran the city over and over and over again, and things never really changed. And my mom had worked here for almost 30 years. So the entire time I was growing up, she worked at Elcan Drug. So I spent, even though I grew up south of Plains, I spent a ton of time over here. And just watched, we lost the Purina plant, we lost a lot of the industry we had out by the airport. And it was like, Liberal always did a good job of sticking in there and maintaining, but while all these other communities were kind of growing and thriving, ours wasn't doing as well in some of those aspects. And so I remember one day when I opened TFA, I was doing a phone repair for a gentleman, and he said, what do you think of the way the city's ran here? Well, of course, I'm doing a phone repair, so I just hop right into, I think if we had better, more intelligent decision makers, that, we could advance this community quite a ways. But unfortunately, we have people that are just, interested in pushing forward their own agenda and profiting themselves, and that has stunted the growth of our community. And when I was going to doing the phone repair, the gentleman stood up and said, well, I'm a city commissioner. If you think you can do a better job, then you should try. Well, I'm kind of a person that, if you light a fire under me, I will. And so it was actually an interesting scenario. I did not tell my wife at all. I didn't think I'd get it. So what the kind of mentality I had was, I knew that if I ran for commission or if I got on a commission, it would hurt my business. And I had just started TFA. And so I was really irritated by that guy's level of arrogance. And so I remember making my mind up right after he left. I was like, I will run. And what I will do is every opportunity I get to speak publicly leading up to election day, I am going to point out to people and try to wake up as many people as possible to paying more attention to the people that they elect locally and holding these people accountable. So I did not accept any money, did not spend any money. I never asked anyone to vote for me. I never called anybody, did not knock on doors, nothing. Because the goal was do not get elected. But just, kind of shake people by the shoulders. Well, then I found out we had those forums. And I was super excited about that because I always love a good confrontation with somebody verbally, especially with people that are forced in an environment like that to behave. And so when I found out we had those, I was like, yes. And it was really fun because every single one of those, I showed up about 30 seconds to 2 minutes before it started, and everybody was so prepared and had all these notebooks out and, had all these practice questions out and stuff. And then here I show up and I'm just like, man, I just locked up the shop, and I'd sit down. And I remember the first time, Ron Warren, who I've served with now for 2 years, we'd never met. And he didn't even know that I was running. He thought I was just some kid standing up there, and he was like, excuse me, I got to get on this side of the table. I'm like, well, I do too,
Like,
yeah, exactly. But it was a really entertaining race because there were 13 of us candidates running. There was a lot of highly controversial stuff happening in that ex-commission towards that time period. And so I found the forums to be a very comfortable environment because the questions were very common sense. After the first one, I started having more people reach out, and I used every opportunity I could to tell people like, hey, we got to stop putting up with this kind of stuff. We have to start holding these people accountable and start showing up to meetings and things like that. I'd never really been involved with local government or really been interested in it up to that point. And then probably around the second forum, when we had the primary and I came in second, I was like, oh, and that's when I had to tell the wife. Yeah, that's what I had to tell the wife because it ended up in the paper and everything. And so I remember my wife, yes, and she was livid because I have a bad track record of doing this. So when I made TFA, I didn't tell her until after I incorporated it, created the business, and was like, by the way, you're half owner. And so a lot of times, whenever I have one of those moments where all of a sudden the ambition lines up with the intelligence and I realize what I need to do, I have a problem with moving at it indefatigably instead of conversing with my partner about it. And so at this point, she's like, you just started up a business, we just got pregnant, or getting ready to start a family, and here you go getting involved in this. And of course she was supportive, but she was really irritated that I didn't discuss it with her, which I would have been too. In retrospect, tisk tisk, that's a shame on me thing. And so then I remember closer after the let's see, it wasn't the general election, but the very first one. So after that, we had a third forum, and I started to realize that there was a chance I could get elected, and I remember just thinking, oh, this is going to be intense. So when everybody else went out to celebrate that night of the election and have their little parties about, hey, we're getting ready to get the results, no, I sat on the couch beside my wife very quietly and was just like, I'm so sorry. And we just sat there, and then when the newspaper said, Mayor Seegers came in first, or Connie Seegers came in first, and then Taylor Hardin came in second, I was just like, crap. And the reason that I say crap is because if you're viewing local government correctly and you actually understand what you just got involved in, that is a massive undertaking and obligation, because it completely shifts the dynamics of being a private sector business owner to now I am the lowest person on the totem pole. It is my obligation to take hundreds of different opinions and views and belief systems and try to make sure that what the local government is going to do is represent all of us as a community. And so you get certain people that when they get elected, they're like, right. I'm a city commissioner. Yeah, mine was the opposite. Mine was, these people now are all my boss, basically. Like my obligation is now, I am tethered to this community. I have to make sure that I am diligent about everything I'm doing. And I knew getting into it that being ethical and moral would be a really difficult struggle, because there's a reason why we have so many ethical problems in our government, like at a federal and state level. And so, kind of hit the ground running when we fired the city manager the first night and things like that. And in retrospect, that actually helped a lot, because we got a lot of very difficult situations handled right off the bat. So after that, it was all kind of downhill from there when it came to, wow, that was really difficult, and everything leading up to that was difficult. I always tell people I had a lot of trouble sleeping in the nights leading up to getting sworn in, because we knew we had situations that needed dealt with. I slept like a baby after that first night, after that first commission meeting, because it was just like the weight of the world had been lifted. So I think a lot of local leaders I know were kind of the same way, where they didn't actually have a calling to get into it. It was just decided to run one day, ended up getting it, and then next thing you know, you're in it, and so you just fully commit to it, and then the rest is history.
Yeah, and I love what you said about telling the wife last minute. I'm kind of with you on that same page. As terrible of an idea as that is, although it happened, I remember, the night I got engaged with my wife here, literally the next day I was like, oh, by the way, I signed a lease, and we're business owners now, so yeah, here we go.
Yeah, that's how it happens. I think it's a good thing, because, when you have that initiative, and you feel that calling all of a sudden where you just know. It was so bizarre. Like with TFA, I went from the day before thinking, okay, this is kind of what I want to make with a business. This is kind of what I want to do with it. The next morning I knew. I mean, it was instantaneous, where I was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I need to do to accomplish that. This is the timeline I need to set for myself to make this happen. Yeah. And so I think that's what gets in your mind. It's not, I'm trying to keep this from my spouse, doing this. It's when you have that level of ambition and the spark finally ignites, you tend to just roll with the flames and get everything going.
Now or never.
Yeah, exactly.
So your family they're farmers?
Yeah, so my father, Dean Hardin, he created a farmstead south of Plains. So we grew up about 15, 20 miles south of Plains, right north of the XIT Ranch. And my mother was a pharmacist, Patricia Hardin. She worked at Elcan Drug here in town for a great long tenure when Bill Wilson was the owner. And then as soon as he passed away, they actually moved up to Ogden, which is right outside of Manhattan, because she got a job working as a military contracted pharmacist up at the base at Fort Riley. And at that point, Dad had started scaling down the farming operation enough where it was applicable for him to leave and kind of maintain things from there. My sister's a doctor as well. She's also a pharmacist, and she's out at the Hutchinson Hospital. And so very agriculture-based family, but absolute brilliance flowing throughout my mother and sister to be able to achieve all of the accomplishments they have. But yes, very much, a farm-based family.
Right. So that's what I was getting to is just, coming from that family, are
Mhm.
you the only one that that had that spark of like technology and wanting to start a business
No,
in technology?
I would say that they also had that spark. My sister never had the desire, as far as I know, to be a business owner, but she knew. It's actually insane to me looking back. She knew when we were little kids that she was going to be a pharmacist, and she crafted her entire life to follow down that path flawlessly. And I applaud her to this day because while I may have a business and everything that goes along with that, and have the pleasure of being, vice mayor and mayor and liberal, she has probably one of the deepest knowledge pools of education that I've ever seen. And she is an absolute expert in her field and just brilliant. And what I always think is funny is I'll be around people and they're like, wow, you make me feel dumb. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. That's not, not my intent. My sister makes me feel dumb without even trying. Because, I just listen to her when she starts talking about what she loves in her field. And I'm just like, my God. But Dad was always very entrepreneurial as well. And I think that's kind of where I got a lot of my charisma, a lot of my ambition with that. And then had an excellent family structure, nuclear family structure growing up. Just always have had support from my family. We always stayed tight-knit. Only, my mother and father have only been married to each other. And so we were very fortunate in that way. And growing up out on the farm, you just learn to take care of each other and provide for each other. And so it's just a very healthy lifestyle.
Right. Coming out of a family structure like that, and seeing just where we are today in the world, do you think that's something that if we had more of, would make a bigger impact on our society?
Yeah, 100%. So I think the biggest problem that we are facing in this society right now is fatherlessness, because that transcends how old you get. You're always going to face difficult issues if you were raised in a non-nuclear family home environment, because in my opinion, it drastically changes the perception that you have of reality itself. So for example, if you grow up in an environment where you do not have a nuclear family home structure, you don't have the stability at home and the safety at home, you don't have the encouragement system and people that are there as a safety net to catch you when you fall, you end up becoming more calloused and you have a much darker view of the world because you didn't have, the beautiful Christmases with your family. You didn't have all these family memories, of all these awesome things. And so I think it's really difficult when you place the burden of responsibility of raising even one child on a single parent. Because, there's a lot of things that, going back to when we were talking about the Bible, there's a lot of things about having a mother and a father in a household that are very significant to the development of a child, development of a child, in my opinion, because that is what gives them a sense of being well-rounded, of being able to accept and adopt other people's beliefs and kind of being, I guess I would say, non-animositous while also having the ability to be confrontational without allowing it to escalate into conflict.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I was having this conversation earlier today with a friend, and as conservatives, I feel like that's where we agree on so much because we understand and we were fortunate to come up in that kind of environment. And, we understand that not everybody had that opportunity to. So is that kind of where you think more people are seeing and understanding as to why now more than ever, the want or desire or the embrace of like socialistic ideas is kind of growing because people think, well, if my parents couldn't take care of me, then, maybe the government could.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that when you look at the disintegrationist mindset that has taken a lot of the youth in this nation, these were children that were raised without having a nuclear family home structure. A lot of their childhoods were very, very difficult. And they feel lost in this nation. So I do a lot of time connecting with people, and I always try to make sure that I present myself in a way where people know they're safe to share their views and opinions and beliefs with me, even if they are completely off the deep end compared to what I believe. I would never persecute somebody for the way they believe. And what I've kind of been able to receive from this youngest generation, and I would say the two younger generations below us, is that they feel very left out of this country, of the American traditional way of life that we all had leading up to that point. Most of them view that ideology of what we hold near and dear as a lie. So everything can be viewed through multiple lenses of perception. And what my perception of this country always was is that we were a country of hardworking individuals that were God-fearing, that focused on our families, and we work and provide for our families to build our own dynasties. But we always do this by connecting with those around us and helping and celebrating in other people's success. So when you see a neighbor failing, you don't sit there and ridicule them and take joy in their failure. When you see somebody failing in your community, you would reach out and help bolster them because that's the same support that you had from your family. Well, when you're raised in an environment where you're maybe, okay, let's say that you're immediately interjected into a foster care system. You are shuffled around from home to home to home to home, and most of these people don't actually care about you. They're just wanting to get subsidiary payments from the government. So you never actually receive a connection with somebody older than you that can provide you wisdom, that can teach you things, that can help you live their experiences without actually having to go through them. So that's where you get this disintegrationalist mindset of, well, you know what, this country failed me, and this country had nothing to offer me, and I didn't have any assistance. And from that dissent, you start to view this country through a different lens, where you can absolutely say that, well, this country was racist, it was misogynist, it was bigotous, and all these things. Well, yes, we were at different points in time, but we're also the only country that actually came through, faced all of these issues head on, and created legislation that created equality for every type of person that could ever possibly live here. Right. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if these people that are in these younger generations that feel that way about our country, that are going to be your socialists, your anarchists, your disintegrationalists, if they would even be interested in having a nuclear home family themselves, because they never experienced it growing up. Right. And so, you know, I don't think that they understand the value that we all place in that as conservatives, because as a conservative, that is 100% what tethers me to that belief system is, you know, that I believe in God, and through that belief in God, I believe that we should have, you know, mother, father in a household, and be able to provide a very stable living environment for our children, where we're able to pass knowledge on from our life experiences to them to help prepare them before we send them out in the world.
Right. And going back to what you were saying, you know, in reference to what got you into the local politics to begin with, you saw people that were in it for a long time, kind of the same people, the same faces, and, you know, they were kind of in it for their own personal gains. People tend to, you know, when they look at local politics and think, oh, it doesn't really, I don't need to be, you know, involved in this. I don't need to really vote. It's not going to change much. Mm-hmm. That sounds almost exactly like what's going on the national level. You know, we have these career politicians. Yeah. So in retrospect, I mean, before you got involved with the city politics, has your whole outlook on government changed?
Yes, drastically. Because I think, you know, before I got involved with local politics, I had a very naive understanding of how the government worked. Like, my understanding of how the government worked was what I had seen and what I had learned in school and what I believed to be the case. The longer I've been in local government and gotten to meet commissioners from around the state, and gotten to meet state legislators and senators and federal congressmen and things like that, it starts to paint a very different picture. So, for example, you know, with our current presidential cabinet that we have right now, and every presidential cabinet that we've had since George H.W. Bush, I'm not a fan now of things like executive orders. And I think that there's a lot of people that, if they weren't in government, they just view that as, oh, this is just what the government does. But no, it's not. Can you imagine that if we applied that same logic at a local level? Can you imagine if you had one commissioner, so that, let's say the mayor in this example, that could simply bypass the voice of the rest of the community to impose their will upon a populace just by signing a piece of paper that nobody had checks and balances overview of?
It would be terrifying.
Yeah, and so I never paid attention to those things before I became somebody who was actually serving at what I believe is the most efficient and most critical level of government. And so I always tell people now, when you look at different layers of government, so no matter where you live in this country, you're going to have 4. So you're going to have, well, I actually say that you could have 3 or 4. If you live in the country, you'll have 3. If you live in a city, you'll have 4. So the governmental hierarchy is going to be city, county, state, fed. The higher up that chain you go, the less accountability for financial anything there is. So at a local level, we can show you where every penny was spent. Even if we lost money on a bad investment or anything like that, we can show you and track every single cent. And that's exactly why it's so easy to pass audits year after year. And that's why we don't have the transparency issues that you have when you go higher up the ladder. Now, in this area, we're very fortunate that our county is also very well ran, to where we can do the same thing with them. You and I could go down, we could do an open records request for the budget, we could go through every single line item on that and account for every penny of local tax dollars that come out. So those, to me, are very fantastic and efficient styles of government. The higher up that chain you go, that's where I've started to, the longer I've served as a commissioner, where I start to realize we need the most reform, especially at a federal level, because the guise of we don't have to explain ourselves because it's a matter of national security. Well, we all own this country. We all have a right to know exactly what's taking place, what our tax dollars are being spent on, why decisions are being made the way they are, and to have justifiable explanations whenever radical decisions are made. And the media and the politicians have kind of grouped themselves together to make it to where there's no accountability for anyone. So what they've kind of done, in my opinion, is they've made us feel like we're this big, and we're the big federal government, so we tell you what to do. And it's very much the lower down you go the ladder, the other way around. So I always tell people here in Liberal, I do believe that the city of Liberal should be ran like a business, wholeheartedly, definitively. Same thing with Seward County. Same thing with Garden City. Any of these Class 1 cities, any of these counties, should be ran like a business. And the way that you should view the hierarchy, in my opinion, is that every single person who lives within the city of Liberal city limits, whether you are renting an apartment, whether you own a house here, does not matter. If you live here and call this home, you own this business. Okay, so imagine it like a C corporation where 20,000 of us own this business. Yet at any point in time, we can only appoint 5 at-large members of the community to oversee the way the business is being ran, which would be your commissioners. From that, when you look at the hierarchy of the city of Liberal, you have City Manager Calvin Burke, you have City Financial Director Chris Ford. Well, when you look at that, that's your CEO, your CFO, and you have the same structure. And when you apply that mentality to it, you can focus on being more financially responsible, running things more efficiently, making sure that you have a fair and equal workplace, while also absorbing everything from the people that choose to confide in you from your constituents in the community to make sure that we're building the type of community that we all want to be able to have.
Absolutely. And, I loved what you said. And it's so clear, even more so than, today. And we're seeing it with every stimulus check that's being written. They're like, oh, yeah, well, like 1% of this is actually towards helping people. We're just going to kind of like squeeze in all this other stuff. Like, don't worry about it. Don't look through it. Don't ask us about it. Don't ask us how we spend your money. And sometimes money we don't even have. It's just money we're going to like print and stuff like that. But I definitely appreciate the transparency that you guys are always trying to push.
Absolutely.
I didn't really watch the commission meetings and and things like that until recently, last year, and I love how just every penny, everything is counted and set forth. And it's like, do we really need this? Should we really pass this? Is this in the budget? And it's incredible to see that. So I'm really excited over the next couple of weeks, months, years, even all the conversations that we can have and explaining, some of the notable things that were passed during commission meetings, things that maybe are up for debate. Just going over the last one on the 26th, what was something you felt that was great that passed that day for the city?
So there's every single meeting, there's always going to be things that, each individual commissioner might gravitate towards because it's more in their area or field of expertise, and then just overall good things for the community. Last meeting for me, it's going to sound kind of self-serving, it was my first full meeting as mayor, which I've been really looking forward to having the opportunity to be mayor here, because what people have to understand is there are different types of governmental structures with local governments. So when you look at a place like Derby, for example, I believe Derby has a 10-person commission with an at-large elected mayor who is elected by the community, not by the internal board. Okay. So the way that our Class 1 city is structured is that the public elects all 5 of the elected officials for alternating terms. So you always have 2 4-year terms and 1 2-year term, so that you're always alternating out. And you can only ever have 2 that were serving together for consecutive 4-year terms unless you have a re-election. Well, then the vice mayor and mayor seats are actually internally elected amongst the commission themselves, because there's no more power to any one position than there is the other. So I've kind of talked with media in the past, is that vice mayor and mayor are more figurehead positions, to where when there's an event where a camera's going to get shoved in your face, something happens, there's a big news story, they're typically going to go straight to the mayor or straight to the vice mayor, and that's going to be the biggest difference that you have amongst the commissioners. But the biggest difference about being mayor is that you run the meeting. Well, I'm a talker. I love talking. And so I've been in so many meetings my entire life that I have been thrilled for the last 3 years at the opportunity just to be able to host the meeting. And I actually think that with the way our governmental structure is, it actually alleviates some of the stresses of being a commissioner to be mayor. And I know that sounds interesting, but it's because the mayor cannot make motions. So that significantly changes the dynamic of what I've had for the last 3 years, because as vice mayor, I bet if you went and looked back across the last 3 years of meetings, no exaggeration, I bet I made 80% or more of the motions, which is not a bad thing at all. It's because I'm a very outspoken person, and typically, like, if there's 5 seconds of silence, I'm like,
it's too much.
Make a motion. Yeah, exactly. And so, it's very fun for me. That last meeting was just so entertaining for me to be the one that, sat there and said, do we have any more discussion on the item? All in favor. I've always dreamed of doing that. And I think all of us have this part of us that always, like when we're kids and we love America, we think, I want to be the president and stuff. And I was always one of those kids. So being able to be vice mayor was an immense honor for me. And then being able to have the opportunity on my final year in the municipal office to be mayor. My commissioners know I'm not rerunning. I've told people that from the beginning because I didn't plan on getting involved in this in the first place. I need to get back to focusing on my business and trying to grow it back to the point it was before I started. And so, I think that was probably the funnest thing for me, is getting to maintain being vice mayor for 3 years and then being able to finish on an even higher note and having the confidence of my peers to be able to have that opportunity. Last meeting, as far as the agenda items, were all pretty standard. We've been doing a lot of financial work this year because due to the coronavirus pandemic, due to all the economic craziness and quantitative easing and just things that I don't even, we could do whole videos on by themselves, it has made municipal bonds exceedingly cheap. So I have been thrilled this year because we've been able to refinance a lot of projects that we had at 6% interest for 0.5% interest and things like that. So we've been discussing a lot of larger projects this year, like getting 2nd Street redone, finally, because anybody who's driven down that road knows that it's like Ace Ventura, just sitting there the entire time, it feels like you're driving through a minefield. And there was just a lot of our infrastructure in the past that got, put by the wayside because of bad decision making. So everybody in this community knows about Trailmobile. That is exactly why you never give a general obligation bond to a private sector company, ever. It's just never a good idea. Well, that set our community behind by about a decade financially. So now that we're finally getting to where we're in the situation where we've recovered from that, we're receiving enough funds into different auxiliary funds for the city where we can actually afford to do projects without getting a loan. It's put us in the situation where we're rapidly getting all the infrastructure caught up. And that's probably been the funnest thing for me, is that we haven't done anything pretty. Like we haven't been a commission that was able to go and spend hundreds of thousands on beautification, of having beautiful trees and all this. But what we have been able to do is set in motion getting all the water lines replaced in a timely fashion, because we had some in town that were like 84 years old. And being able to get all of the drainage fixed, which in the area we're at, we've seen significant differences in this area alone in the last 2 years. And so there's a lot of things like that I'll take pride in for years and years and years to come. Because it's the non-flashy stuff. It's when I get a drive down 2nd Street someday, I'll be able to look over at the wife and be like, I had a part in that. It's fantastic. I was all the commissioner when they did that. So, I think every meeting, there's always multiple things that I take away from it. But last meeting, we didn't really have any items on the agenda that I would say stuck out any more than, what they would pretty much every meeting. We'll have one on the next meeting, though. That'll be a lot of fun. So I highly recommend everybody watch that.
Awesome.
Indeed.
Yeah. And we hope you guys do. And that's awesome. I love that you get just excited to hear that, we're going to improve the city in some small kind of way. And I love the transparency, by the way, that you're willing to offer, and just like, let's talk over, what a change can mean. How is this going to affect everybody? And, I'm hoping that through the whole purpose of this, that we bring more attention to our local politics. And, we don't have to take something small and really blow it up. We just have to show everybody, hey, and how we were talking about earlier, the federal stuff. And what I love about Liberal in this location is we don't feel a lot of the big things. We we feel the ripples of it much later. But
how fortunate were we last year?
Yeah.
I've told so many people that when it comes down to when people ask me, why do you choose to live where you live? I don't care what anybody says. We actually have very affordable cost of living. Now, is it higher than what it used to be 20 years ago? Across the boards, everywhere, no matter where you live. But I lived in Chicago. That was insanely expensive, and the quality of life was exponentially worse than what we have here. And here we have a very low crime rate. We have affordable cost of living. We have a decent amount of job opportunities. That's something that I think that every single commission that we ever have should always put a significant importance on improving. But when it comes to transparency, I'm kind of self-righteous. So I love being able to fully be transparent, because I know for a fact that in the last 3 years that I've served this office, I've never done a single thing unethical, because I memorized the government ethics code and make sure that if I feel like I'm even tiptoeing near a situation that could cross that line, I stay completely away from it. And so I know in the beginning, a lot of people tagged me as a little good old boy. I think I was always called Jack Carlisle's pet, because when Jack was alive, he embodied the old guard in a lot of ways. Him and his father were major politicians here. And so serving with somebody like that as the young guy coming up that plans on killing the Good Old Boys Club, and then immediately being interjected in the situations we were, and then Jack was very much a politician. It was kind of culture shock for me, because I'm just sitting there like, oh my goodness, yeah, we can get in trouble real quick. But what's beautiful about the city of Liberal and the county, and technically the higher levels, even though we know it'll never be that way, is that every single thing that takes place in the city is 100% public domain and knowledge and information. The only things that commissioners cannot discuss is personnel. So anything that has to do, that would be derogatory towards an individual that works for the city, is never a conversation that a commissioner should be engaged with. It's not professional. It can hurt and slander that person. It can hurt their opportunities in the community. And it's just something that should be stayed away from. So we can talk about personnel in certain instances, but definitely when people come to me with gossip about, "Ooh, I heard this happen to somebody at the city," I shut that down very quickly, because it's honestly none of their business outside of the organization, because that could hurt the person's potential in the community. The flip side of that, only other thing I would say is confidential up to a point, is economic development. A lot of these corporations have assigned confidentiality contracts because they're terrified of price gouging. Somebody hears they're coming to town, and ooh, my building's the only one that's the size that they need. And next thing you know, that building goes from being 80,000 to 260,000, and we don't get that opportunity to get that business. Outside of that, there is not a single thing that the city does that is not public domain. We should be able to talk to citizens about every single thing in finite detail. And so any commissioner that steers away from that is one you should keep an extra close eye on in a meeting, because all of this that we do represents all of us as a community, and therefore, since we all own the business, we all have a right to public access and knowledge of the information therein.
Well, I'm really relieved that that's the attitude and direction we're going in over this next year. I'm really excited and looking forward to all the conversations that we're going to have over this next year.
I too.
And I'm not looking forward to you not rerunning, but I'll have to accept it and appreciate your decision.
I've had a lot of people
what's best for your family.
I've had a lot of people hammering me on that. So, my wife always says, "Yeah, we'll see when the time comes to sign up if you actually hold to it." But, it definitely is not because I haven't enjoyed the experience. It's just because I think taking a couple years off of being in politics, now that I got some experience under my belt, I can apply a lot of the things that I've learned from running a $42 million a year business to my very small business, and focus more on my family and getting my business to where I want it to be, and then take a step back into the realm of politics, because it's very all-encumbering.
Man, don't you just wish that our lifetime career politicians would kind of
if any of them do how to work
tactics,
for a living, because I would say every time that you get a politician who has worked for a living, they don't fit in with the other politicians. And so you see them get cast out like lepers, and you can see examples of this throughout history. But it's always interesting, because I would have never imagined that people could make a career out of being a politician. Now, what you can do is make a career out of being a lobbyist, which is what a lot of our politicians have become, is lobbyists for different organizations and different things that they're trying to get pushed. But in all reality, we need term limits at every single position throughout every part of government in this country, because without that, you have no layers of accountability. You and I, as people who live here in Liberal, Kansas, how do we hold a congressman accountable? As people who are nonviolent, that have very little means of being able to communicate in real time with a congressman, the only way we can hold them accountable is by voting. And if they remove the right for us to be able to vote because they have indefinite term limits, there's no accountability to that. And so when you have people that are still serving in our government, that were serving when your and I's parents were alive and we weren't on this earth, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yep. And we have a president.
Well, Mayor Hardin, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking the time to come in and have this first discussion, and I'm really looking forward to all the future ones.
Kevin, thank you so much for the opportunity, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for checking out episode 1 of the Liberal Conservative Show. Stay tuned for weekly interviews and bi-weekly updates right after the commission meetings. See you next week.
I love that this man has so many Bibles.